This is section 23 of Newspaper Articles by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Newspaper Articles by Mark Twain, section 23, Territorial Enterprise, November 1865, Part 2. Territorial Enterprise, November 15th through 18th, 1865. Portion of letter from San Francisco. Editorial Puffing. Let John Wickham Smith, Esquire, one of our pioneer merchants, and one among our wealthiest and most respected citizens, leave in the steamer to revisit the home of his nativity, and one of these papers will give you half a column of sorrow and distress about it, and wind up with the eternal, "But we are happy to say that not many months will elapse ere he will be with us again," and forget to mention that a distinguished and war-bronzed Major-General went in the same steamer with the wealthy and successful Smith. The other paper would let John Wickham Smith go to the States, or to the devil, either, a dozen times over, and always maintain an insolent silence about it. But let Moike Mulrooney, or Tim Murphy, or Judy O'Flaherty receive a present of Ryle Irish whiskey from the Auld country, and it will never let you hear the last of it. Territorial Enterprise, November 18th, 1865. Portion of letter from San Francisco. The Old Thing. As usual, the Alta reporter fastens the mysterious What Cheer robbery on the same horrible person who knocked young Myers in the head with a slung-shot a year ago, and robbed his father's pawnbroker shop of some brass jewelry and crippled revolvers in broad daylight, and he laid that exploit on the horrible wretch who robbed the mayor's clerk, who half murdered Detective Officer Rose in a lonely spot below Santa Clara, and he proved that this same monster killed the lone woman in a secluded house up a dark alley with a carpenter's chisel months before. And he demonstrated by inspired argument that the same villain who chiseled the woman tomahawked a couple of defenseless women in the most mysterious manner up another dark alley a few months before that. Now, the perpetrator of these veiled crimes has never been discovered, yet this wicked reporter has taken the whole batch and piled them coolly and relentlessly upon the shoulders of one imaginary scoundrel, with a comfortable, "Here, these are yours," and with an air that says plainly that no denial and no argument in the case will be entertained. And every time anything happens that is unlawful and dreadful and has a spice of mystery about it, this reporter, without waiting to see if maybe somebody else didn't do it, goes off at once and jams it on top of the old pile, as much as to say, "Here's some more of your work." Now, this isn't right, you know. It is all well enough for Mr. Smythe to divert suspicion from himself. Nobody objects to that. But it is not right for him to lay every solitary thing on this mysterious stranger, whoever he is. It is not right, you know. He ought to give the poor devil a show. The idea of accusing the mysterious of the What Cheer burglary, considering who was the last boarder to bed and the first one up. Smythe is endeavoring to get on the detective police force. I think it will be wronging the community to give this man such a position as that. Now you know that yourself, don't you? He would settle down on some particular fellow, and every time there was a rape committed, or a steamship stolen, or an oyster-cellar rifled, or a church burned down, or a family massacred, or a black-and-tan pup stolen, he would march off, with portentous mien, and snatch that fellow and say, "Here, you're at it again, you know," and snake him off to the station-house. Territorial Enterprise, November 19th or 21st, 1865. The Pioneers' Ball. It was estimated that 400 persons were present at the ball. The gentlemen wore the orthodox costume for such occasions, and the ladies were dressed the best they knew how. Nota bene, most of these ladies were pretty, and some of them absolutely beautiful. 4 out of every 5 ladies present were pretty. The ratio at the Colfax party was 2 out of every 5. I always keep the run of these things. While upon this department of the subject, I may as well tarry a moment, and furnish you with descriptions of some of the most noticeable costumes. Mrs. W. M. was attired in an elegant pâté de foie gras made expressly for her, and was greatly admired. Miss S. had her hair done up. She was the center of attraction for the gentlemen, and the envy of all the ladies. Miss G. W. was tastefully dressed in a tout ensemble, and was greeted with deafening applause wherever she went. Mrs. C. N. was superbly arrayed in white kid gloves. Her modest and engaging manner accorded well with the unpretending simplicity of her costume, and caused her to be regarded with absorbing interest by everyone. The charming Miss M. appeared in a thrilling waterfall, whose exceeding grace and volume compelled the homage of pioneers and emigrants alike. How beautiful she was! The queenly Mrs. L. R. was attractively attired in her new and beautiful false teeth, and the bonjour effect they naturally produced was heightened by her enchanting and well-sustained smile. The manner of this lady is charmingly pensive and melancholy, and her troops of admirers desired no greater happiness than to get on the scent of her sozodont-sweetened sighs, and track her through her sinuous course among the gay and restless multitude. Miss R. P., with that repugnance to ostentation in dress which is so peculiar to her, was attired in a simple white lace collar fastened with a neat pearl-button solitaire. The fine contrast between the sparkling vivacity of her natural optic and the steadfast attentiveness of her placid glass eye was the subject of general and enthusiastic remark. The radiant and sylph-like Mrs. T., late of your State, wore hoops. She showed to good advantage, and created a sensation wherever she appeared. She was the gayest of the gay. Miss C. L. B. had her fine nose elegantly enameled, and the easy grace with which she blew it from time to time marked her as a cultivated and accomplished woman of the world. Its exquisitely modulated tone excited the admiration of all who had the happiness to hear it. Being offended with Miss X., and our acquaintance having ceased permanently, I will take this opportunity of observing to her that it is of no use for her to be sloping off to every ball that takes place, and flourishing around with a brass oyster-knife skewered through her waterfall, and smiling her sickly smile through her decayed teeth, with her dismal pug-nose in the air. There is no use in it. She don't fool anybody. Everybody knows she is old. Everybody knows she is repaired, you might almost say built, with artificial bones and hair and muscles and things, from the ground up, put together scrap by scrap. And everybody knows, also, that all one would have to do would be to pull out her key-pin, and she would go to pieces like a Chinese puzzle. There, now, my faded flower, take that paragraph home with you and amuse yourself with it. And if ever you turn your wart of a nose up at me again, I will sit down and write something that will just make you rise up and howl. Territorial Enterprise, November 28 through 30th, 1865. Uncle Lige. I will now relate an affecting incident of my meeting with Uncle Lige, as a companion novelet to the one published by Dan the other day, entitled Uncle Henry. A day or two since, before the late stormy weather, I was taking a quiet stroll in the western suburbs of the city. The day was sunny and pleasant. In front of a small but neat bit-house, seated upon a bank, a worn and discarded faro-bank, I saw a man and a little girl. The sight was too much for me, and I burst into tears. Oh, God! I cried, this is too rough. After the violence of my emotion had in a manner spent itself, I ventured to look once more upon that touching picture. The left hand of the girl, how well I recollect which hand it was, by the warts on it, a fair-haired, sweet-faced child of about 8 years of age, rested upon the right shoulder. How perfectly I remember it was his right shoulder, because his left shoulder had been sawed off in a sawmill, of the man by whose side she was seated. She was gazing toward the summit of Lone Mountain, and prating of the gravestones on the top of it, and of the sunshine and diggers resting on its tomb-clad slopes. The head of the man drooped forward till his face almost rested upon his breast, and he seemed intently listening. It was only a pleasing pretense, though, for there was nothing for him to hear save the rattling of the carriages on the gravel road beside him, and he could have straightened himself up and heard that easy enough, poor fellow. As I approached, the child observed me, notwithstanding her extreme youth, and, ceasing to talk, smilingly looked at me, strange as it may seem. I stopped, again almost overpowered, but after a struggle I mastered my feelings sufficiently to proceed. I gave her a smile, or rather I swapped her one in return for the one I had just received, and she said, "This is Uncle Lige, poor, blind, drunk Uncle Lige." This burst of confidence from an entire stranger, and one so young withal, caused my subjugated emotions to surge up in my breast once more, but again, with a strong effort, I controlled them. I looked at the wine-bred cauliflower on the poor man's nose, and saw how it had all happened. "Yes," said he, noticing by my eloquent countenance that I had seen how it had all happened, notwithstanding nothing had been said yet about anything having happened. "Yes, it happened in River a year ago. Since that time been living here with Brother Robert and little Addie." "Oh, he's the best uncle, and tells me such stories," cried the little girl. "That's all right, you know, that's all right," said the kind-hearted, gentle old man, spitting on his shirt-bosom and slurring it off with his hand. The child leaned quickly forward and kissed his poor blossomy face. We beheld two great tears start from the man's sightless eyes, but when they saw what sort of country they had got to travel over, they went back again. Kissing the child again and again, and once more, and then several times, and afterwards repeating it, he said, "Ha, ook, hurrah for Mellical Eagle, Star-Spangled Banner. That's all right, you know. That's all right." And he stroked her sunny curls and spit on his shirt-bosom again. This affecting scene was too much for my already overcharged feelings, and I burst into a flood of tears and hurried from the spot. Such is the touching story of Uncle Lige. It may not be quite as sick as Dan's, but there is every bit as much reasonable material in it for a big calf like either of us to cry over. Cannot you publish the two novelettes in book form and send them forth to destroy such of our fellow citizens as are spared by the cholera? End of Section 23.